The air, water, earth, and sun awes us. The four awesome forces of nature can provide 1,000 times more energy than we need. You are also awesome. You and me and all EarthKind are the fifth element. We are literally changing the world. Technology is now harnessing nature's awesome power for electricity, heat, and transportation. And the best news is that the clean energy transition can save us money and create a more prosperous, just, beautiful, and sustainable civilization today. Welcome to the Awesome EarthKind podcast. Mr. Pete Skinner, if you would, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you live, what kind of work you do.
Well, thank you, Ron. This is a great privilege being on your show, and I hope that I can keep up with some of the other people that have been already featured. It's, I think, so important that we take these kind of mechanisms to get the word out on important changes that are taking place, because our Earth is the only planet we got. And if we don't start really addressing really quickly and in a very deep way the energy issues that are driving this climate change, we're not going to have a planet left. It's all going to look like Mars. So, you know, in terms of my background, I'm an engineer. I went to Lehigh and then RPI. And but perhaps the most important thing for me was that when I graduated from Lehigh, I realized, like so many other students at the end of the education experience was there. So along about August, I realized, geez, you're supposed to get a job. And so sitting there in Allentown, I thought I'd go to an employment agency. Yeah, it used to be employment agencies. We didn't have anything online or any of that stuff. So I got an interview at an engineering company, which consisted of one person in a horrible looking office with one bit of decoration. It was a 8x10 glossy picture of one of his most satisfying projects, which was a 700-foot smokestack in Indiana. And, you know, he told me that, you know, his experience at Penn State could be summarized in what he learned that stuck most with him, which was the 5 laws of engineering. And I thought that was some sort of a test. So I said, well, at Penn State, which was our rival, of course, in wrestling and other things, I said, what are the 5 laws at Penn State? We got a few at Lehigh. And he said, drainage, 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 and drainage. And as a budding environmental advocate, I frankly thought, oh, that's not exactly what I thought I'd be doing in my life. And so I didn't accept any job there, but instead I got in the car and I went to New York City, and I went to the Sierra Club. They'd want somebody like me, you know, energetic. I got the technical background. I can really deliver for them. And Peter Borelli, I still remember him. He's a great guy. And he says to me, he says, well, sorry, we don't really have a place for a technical person, but you know what you should do? You should get on a subway and go visit the Attorney General's office. That's Louis Lefkowitz, believe it or not, for those of you who remember. And he's just opened a environmental advocacy office. And we looked at some of their papers. They don't know a water pollution from an air pollution. Okay, so I got my 25 cents. I went down to 80 Center Street. I knocked on the door and I said, I'm here to be your technical person. And Phil Weinberg said, wow, you know, we've been thinking about hiring somebody like that. I said, I'm your man. And in October, I started. And that was 1969, and then, 1970. And I stayed there for 33 years as the chief of scientists. And we brought lawsuits against just about everybody, from nuclear power plants to water pollution, to air pollution, even plutonium transport through Manhattan. Boy, that was the dumbest idea if there ever was one. And we ended up suing EPA for their lack of focus on climate change. And we went all the way to the Supreme Court. I had since graduated, but we went to the Supreme Court and they designated carbon dioxide as a priority pollutant. And so I think that as a capstone of the work I did indicates that, even then I realized that our Earth had even a bigger problem than, say, just water pollution and Love Canal kind of hazardous waste situations. We were really talking about the existence of our planet. And so consequently, that's what I really focused my attention. And after graduating from there, I thought, well, what can I do? And I was tired of writing affidavits and reports and testifying and hiring experts. I thought, I got to get my hands dirty. And so what did I think? Well, let's do something in solar. As a kid, I grew up making water go through pipes. I grew up in Vermont next to the Meadowee River, and I made dams and I made places for the water to go through in pipes. And I had a wonderful time growing up. It was great. And one of the things that I think allowed me to do what I've done in the last 10 years is the fact that I did it myself. I actually built cars that I drove around in the woods. And my mother used to call it an all-terrain wrecker. And my father used to rail at me and steal a spark plug because I didn't have any brakes. But I was in and out of junkyards. I was always putting pipes together and even playing with electricity. And in so doing, you get a sense of what works and what doesn't work. So I thought, hey, heating hot water with solar, what could not be better for a second career or a third career? And that's what I did. And I can remember some of the earliest systems I put in were really from scratch. I went to the plumbing store, I got a pump, I bought some panels, I got a tank, and I hooked it all together, and it didn't work. And I thought, whoa, what's wrong with this? And so by doing, I was able to get fairly familiar with the technology. After I started doing it by component basis, people started coming out with packages. You could buy it all on a skid, and you could take it to your site and hook it all together, and it would work. Yeah, what's not to like about that? And what was not to like about that? I didn't grow intellectually, and it was kind of plug and play, and I didn't really feel as familiar with that as I did with what I could do myself. And so with that in mind, it wasn't long before it dawned on me I wasn't making any money with a 2-panel family home deal, and I graduated to larger systems. And that's where I ran into this guy, Ron Kamen. And frankly, it was a serendipity squared. He had a number of big commercial facilities because, like a smart guy, unlike me in the business world, Ron realized it took just about as much time to build something big as it took to build something small. And the bigger it was, the greater the payback. And that's why Ron is the rich man he is, because all these great big solar systems had clients who liked to pay on time. And as a result, I learned a little bit by trying to help him out. And the first place I helped him out was at Ronnie Brook Farm. So Ron, why don't you kind of tell me a little bit about what it was like building at big dairies and other places and what you learned, and then we'll riff on what I learned doing it the harder way.
All right, we shall indeed. Well, let's start, if we could, please, with, since we just had this little rambling intro, a quantum quote, a quote that helps set people's mindset for the future of this particular interview. You got one you care to share, Mr. Skinner?
I think we really can't sit idly by. We've got to make the decisions. We've got to get things changed fast. So one engineer told me one time, he said, keep this in mind, which was, on the beach of indecision lie the bleached bones of those who with the prize in sight sat down to think it over. And although engineers are often kind of slow to make final decisions, I try to do it as quickly as I can. And one of the reasons I can do it quickly is because I built things that work and I built things that didn't work. And so I can I get a sense, even when I do an Excel spreadsheet, when I do a sum of a column, my first thought is, does that make sense? Is that number in the right ballpark? And so even as small as that, I try to make sure I'm in the right ballpark and try to avoid paralysis by analysis. And one other thing that I just can't understand about these millennials, is they don't talk to their clients. I can hardly get my kids on the telephone. They text me and they Instagram me and they do all these things, which social media, which, why not just call me up? And so it really happened this morning. I wrote this big proposal. I spent too much time analyzing how much it costs. And my client said, why don't you come in and talk about it? So at 1:30, I go in to sell a $12,000 heating system because, it's better to look at and actually see the eyes of your client and talk to them. So anyway, that's my basic thing. That's why I'm on the phone all the time.
There we go. All right. So why? We like to start with why, Pete. So before we get into some of the details, why do you do this stuff? What is it that's your driving motivation, sir?
Well, they call me the Energizer Bunny. And at 74 years old, I'm still going, 10 to 12 hours a day, trying to accomplish something that I hope will really make a difference for this earth and for our fellow man and women. So, it's very satisfying when you look at some of my projects and see that they're working and they're making a difference for the environment and for our energy systems in general. So that's why I'm doing solar systems, solar thermal systems. That's why I'm doing heat pumps. And that's why I'm doing something I'd like to talk about today, which is practically perfect plumbing, PPP. And it's a new way of looking at how to deliver hot water in multifamily buildings. It's a complete change in terms, especially the size of the pipe and the way that pipe is arranged to get the hot water to people fast with a small amount of waste involved.
So let's talk about that. So when we take a look at energy, we've got the electricity component of energy, we've got the transportation program of getting around, piece of it, and then we've got the heat and hot water in our buildings, which is over a third of the energy that we use and a huge chunk of greenhouse gases. And so yeah, we met first with solar hot water at the Ronnie Brook Farm, which is a dairy farm in upstate New York and right in the Hudson Valley that does a lot of yogurts and other food processing, etc. But hot water in general can be up to 18 or 20% or more of a family's bill. And then in a multifamily building, could be even a larger percentage. So tell us about these net zero buildings first. What is net zero? How do you define net zero? And then how does your work fit in with the projects you're doing on creating these net zero projects in multifamily buildings?
Well, late in my solar thermal building career and design career, and after teaching a lot and authoring a textbook called Solar Hot Water Fundamentals, I got this call from a great person up in Saranac Lake, and he invited me to meet with a client of his, David Bruns. Dave Bruns used to work for GE as an IT guy, and he graduated into being a developer of apartment houses. I didn't know him from Adam, but as soon as we met, we knew we were just two peas in a pod. He wanted to do everything he could to innovate in the dwelling or the tenant dwelling arena. And I thought, wow, what a great person to be associated with. They had a great team. And that was the place for me. And I sold a bill of goods. I said, I want to really do everything I could to deliver his hot water in a way that was cost effective and also saved a lot of energy in doing so. And that's where we came up with a design for a 13 building complex near Schenectady, New York. Actually, if you're on I-88 and you kept driving straight right over the thruway, you'd end up right in Net Zero Village. And you can see it right from the thruway. And on top of the buildings, you will see my solar thermal panels that I developed the design for and installed all of them. Actually, 26 systems, 7 panel systems on each building, because they were kind of like duplexes, 6 on one side, 6 on the other. And here's a picture of them. I don't know if you can see this. This is, you know, I can't believe it, but Net Zero Village has been around now for 6 years. All my systems are working great, and they're very simple. They're drain back systems. They operate only when there's a need for heat and the sun is out. And so my maintenance is very limited because they're so simple. And if something ever happens to me, anybody can fix it. It's just that simple. So it's been operating very well, and it's a net zero village, not passive house, which is the next step higher, but net zero means that all the energy that is used on the site over a year is created on the site. And that includes photovoltaic panels, which are on all the carports, and solar thermal panels, which are on all the roofs. And you take all the energy that's created thanks to the sun, and it comes to maybe 120% of all the energy used on the site. Now, of course, one of the reasons that's possible is that the buildings themselves are built so carefully, so tight, so the air doesn't leak, and heat pumps provide the heating and cooling for the rooms. And with the great insulation that was built there, all the energy is created on site over the year. It's still grid tied, but it's if you total up everything we create on site and you subtract how much the tenants use, you find that there's a net zero energy footprint.
Great. So during the day when the sun is shining, the solar electric is producing electricity. The solar hot water is producing hot water. And then during the night, you're taking it back off the grid, and the net over the year is zero. And so tell us, so you've got efficiency with all sorts of great insulation built in. You've got solar electric panels put onto carports, got solar hot water on the roof. And then what do you do for the rest of the hot water and the energy when the sun's not shining, Pete?
Well, that's really a good question. And as you know better than anybody else, you know, when it's cold and it's cloudy in the wintertime, the solar thermal panels don't produce very well. And even the PV doesn't produce as well either, because the angle of the sun is low, and the angle of incidence is such that we just don't get as much energy. And that's when the grid has to take over some of those loads. And, you know, that's kind of the nature of the both the solar and, for that matter, the wind as well. We have to have a balance of energy storage and, to some extent, some alternative, always available supply to make up the difference for renewable energy. But thanks to some of the major steps forward that technology has done in the last 10 years, there's all kinds of ways to store energy. And in the end, that's going to be how renewables become the centerpiece of a climate control solution that we're going to need. So at Net Zero, we use the grid to be our backup. But in the end, we supply more to the grid than the grid requires. But people don't really want to take a cold shower. You know, I've learned the hard way, and I'm no different. So when the sun isn't out and the my tanks are cooled down, there has to be some backup. At Net Zero Village, we put in 2 40-gallon hot water tanks for 6 apartments piped in parallel. And so that meant 4 electric elements that could fire to make up the deficit that my solar left on the table. And so that seemed to be sensible until one of the utility rooms had no room for 2 tanks. So I didn't do this, the plumber did it. He just left one in there and put the other in the corner. And he asked me, do you think that's gonna be okay? I said, I don't know. I hope so. By that time, this Ron Kamen had traded a flow meter, an ultrasonic high resolution flow meter for some of the work that I did with him at Ronnie Brook Farms. So I had this device that could measure how much hot water people were actually using. And gosh, that was 6 apartments. Sometimes maybe as many as 9 people living in one of these duplex apartments houses. And they weren't using very much hot water. So I said to the plumber, well, look, worst comes to worst, I'll just plumb in that extra one. Just leave it over in a corner. And, that was the first phase of Net Zero Village. And we never got a single complaint for those 6 apartments. I said, wow. And I looked at my data, and my data showed that people were not using a lot of hot water in the first place because our fixtures were very low flow. And maybe we got the idea that perhaps you shouldn't use a lot of things that had a lot of energy density, like hot water. But whatever it was, a little 40-gallon tank that even many families would find, too small sometimes with teenagers who like to take hour-long showers. We didn't find a problem. Not only did we not find a problem with the volumes they used over a day, we noticed that they didn't do it or use their fixture simultaneously. Now that shows you not only were the volumes small, but also the peak flows were not small, or not large. That allowed us to make some major innovations. And one of the innovations we used was, instead of 3/4-inch pipe to deliver hot water or 1/2-inch pipe to deliver hot water, we used 3/8-inch diameter PEX. PEX is a flexible tubing material, very easy to put in, and I'll show you a little bit about what we do with that. So we innovated, even in the first phase of Net Zero Village, this small piping. And for those of you who are not familiar with how piping is done, we have a tree analogy: a trunk, branch, and twig. The trunk, of course, is the main pipe that delivers water to individual fixtures via a branch. Now, a branch can go directly to a fixture, but a lot of people put a smaller thing at a branch, and they call that a twig. So I said to the guys, heck with these branches, can't we just go right to a twig? So we did. We went from a trunk to a twig. And that meant a lot less water in the pipes, a lot less energy wasted in the twigs, because after you take a bit of water with your hot water fixture, the water left in the twig just loses that heat, and it loses it to the building. And in the summer, you got to take that heat out of the building. So the smaller the pipe, the less energy is being wasted. And there's another wonderful thing: time to tap. With these twigs, with the small volume there, as soon as you turn on the fixture, the hot water arrives, as long as the trunk is warm. And that's really important to people, because they get tired of waiting. And when they have to wait, that cool water goes down the drain. That's wasted water. And maybe they say, God, where's that? They get used to the fact it's not there. So they go and do something else. They turn it on and they go, I don't know, whatever they do. And, 2 minutes later, they come back and it's hot. Well, the water got there maybe in 30 seconds. So Dave Bruns, my client at Net Zero Village and now at Solara, said, I want that water to arrive in 10 seconds. I said, the only way we could do that is with small pipes. And that's one of the big innovations we did. And it's been a real energy saver, saved a lot of money. And it's one of the parts of practically perfect plumbing that we're trying to get across to everybody in America, that there is a new way of getting water to tenants that saves energy, saves money, saves water, and gets your tenants happier faster.
Outstanding. So basically what you have now is you have a solar hot water system with a small tank, which I still can't believe, 40-gallon hot water tank does all the hot water for 6 apartments. I would love to have seen that with my kids growing up. But anyway, and smaller pipes, which means lower upfront capital costs, lower installation costs, lower everything kind of cost, operational costs. And basically it means that you can hit these net zero targets a lot more efficiently and effectively with less cost, which is pretty amazing to say the least. So outstanding. And so I understand you also did something with heat pumps. So tell us a little bit about that, Pete.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. As I became more familiar with how net zero buildings are built, I also became familiar with heat pumps. And heat pumps were a centerpiece of our whole energy pie at Net Zero Village. These heat pumps were the air-to-air heat pumps. We call them mini splits. Every apartment got one, 12,000 BTUs per hour. Because it was so well insulated, 12,000 BTUs per hour was enough to both heat and to cool. And so as a result, on the outside is a box that has the compressor and the other elements that are required to create a refrigerant that's either warm or cool, depending on the season. The cool in the summertime helps cool the interior, and it pulls the heat out of the space and dumps it outdoors. I said, wait a minute, why couldn't I heat the hot water that way too, if I could only get an air to water heat pump? And guess what? They're available. So for the second the second complex that Dave Bruns put together, I said, Dave, hey, let's do some air to water backup for my solar, because we know there's going to be times when my solar isn't going to be warm enough for people. So let's use the heat pump to make up the difference to the extent we can. And so at the new site, this is a picture in the newspaper of the early Solara. Now there's 7 of these. You can see 4 under construction. There's now 7, and we will start on the next 3 to finish up a 10 building eco luxury net zero development, again, right in Rotterdam, New York. These buildings are not unlike Net Zero Village, but a bit different. Instead of duplex with a total of 12 apartments, this is one building with 24 apartments. So Dave said, well, hey, can you do the solar thermal? I said, sure. And then he said, hey, how about you doing the plumbing too? And I thought to myself, how hard is it to do a plumbing system for a building? I mean, really, how hard can that be? All you got to do is put a trunk line in and little short branches and some twigs and you're done. So I had a little time, and I started doing the engineering of it. And he said, I want that water there to get there in 10 seconds. Okay, how kind of hard can that be? So I developed a design, and it was really simple. It was just a delivery trunk up to a T, and it went out to the ends, and the twigs were hooked to little tiny branches. I'll show you some pictures. And then a little 1/2-inch PEX line back to the utility room in the middle that brought the water back so the trunk could always be warm. I put a little stainless steel pump there, and we run that pump for about 4 minutes and leave it off for 20 minutes. How did I know 20 minutes? Because I measured how long it took for my trunk line to cool from, hey, say 110, 115 degrees down to 106. Because everybody likes to have enough hot water for their shower at 104 or something like that. And so I pulse a recirculation. Everywhere else I go, they have that recirculating pump going 24/7. It's crazy. And there's another innovation right there. And the other thing we did, we made sure that the trunk lines were very well insulated so that the heat loss rate was low. And that way, even the trunk line is not heating up the building in the summer, which requires us to take that heat out. So there's a couple of innovation elements in that. And just as a little story, after I got the first 4 buildings built and used Ron's flow meter to show that, in fact, the uses there were not simultaneous and the uses were low per apartment and tenant, just like Net Zero Village, I thought, wow, hey, this is pretty cool. Why isn't everybody building it this way? And I called up a guy, Gary Klein, he's out in Sacramento, and he'd been writing about this, and I'd seen some of his presentations on the internet. So I finally found his telephone number. I said, Gary, and I was driving back from Boston. I said, Gary, I'm Pete Skinner. He said, okay. I said, well, I've been doing what you've been telling us to do, which is to make the pipes small. Oh, really? He says, yeah. I said, is everybody doing it that way? No, he said. So, man, well, can you come east and take a look? Yeah, he said, I'll be right out. It was as if I had done this kind of organically, kind of like, because it seemed to make sense. And he'd been talking about it in a theoretical sense and trying to change codes across the country. But here I am actually doing it. He came east, he said, that's pretty good. Wow. And so we've been, for the last 2 years, an inseparable partnership here. I crunch the numbers and I measure the flows and I build the systems, and he helps me do that better. And the result is a really excellent partnership that has created this thing we call practically perfect plumbing. And now codes are changing as a result, in part, of what I'm doing and what he has long done. And it's going to really be a revolution in plumbing for multifamily and other similar buildings, because there's no reason to put a 3-inch pipe when you can get by with 1.25 inches.
And is that your biggest learning, you think, Pete?
That's a great question, Ron. When I started on solar thermal, I thought I was learning a lot, but it was really learning that had been the outcome of work that people had been doing for decades. Solar thermal is an old technology, one of the first solar technologies that became popular. And, I think the big innovation and learning that I am now being able to apply to others is this new way of doing plumbing. And I'm not the father of it all by any stretch, because Gary has really been in this space for a long, long time. But he's more of a codes kind of guy, more policy wonk kind of guy. He goes to all these code meetings and talks it up real big. But a lot of these codes guys, they don't have a wrench in their hand. I have a wrench in my hand. And, when my systems don't deliver as promised, first, my license is in jeopardy. But the other problem is I've got an unhappy tenant. And of course, I have an unhappy client who's the developer. Consequently, it's got to work. So what I did at Solara was mock up my proposed system. I actually had for not every, but for a typical apartment, I had a trunk, I had a branch, and I had a twig. And I measured how long it took for that hot water to get there. And I looked at the pressure loss that these small pipes took. And I knew I had to have at least maybe 30 PSI, between 20 and 30 PSI at a shower head. If I didn't have that, the water coming out of the shower was kind of flaccid. And nobody really likes that. Some people really like to have a strong shower. And in Rotterdam, because the pipes are so old, they can't really pressurize the water mains. On a good day, we have maybe 50 PSI. And then after the double backflow preventer, we're down to 45. And after it starts going through all my solar system, we're down to 42. And then you go up, up to the third floor. Oh no, we're down to less than 40 and sometimes less than 30 if people are using a lot of water and as they're doing so simultaneously. So I have to be mindful, not only for time to tap, but I have to be mindful that there is enough pressure at the last person's shower head in order to make them happy. And it's got to be hot. So those kind of things, temperature, pressure, and time to tap are all the challenges that I have to meet. So not only did I do the math, but I actually mocked it up. And then when Gary came out, he said, wow, you actually tried it up front? I said, yeah, because, they're going to do 24 of these in every building. It better work. And so that's what, I proved to myself, both by the math and by the actual design, that it actually worked. And all the people are very happy. And except for one building where, and we can talk about how we supplied the water, but one building did great that first winter. The second winter, all of a sudden I was getting complaints that there wasn't enough hot water. So I grabbed Ron's wonderful flow meter. Thank you, Ron. You did it all. Little did you know when we did that trade. Anyway, I found out that in building B1 at Solara, those tenants love to take long showers. It's not a senior housing. It's actually a totally mixed demographic. We have kids, we have young professionals, we have middle-aged professionals, especially during the pandemic. They stayed home and did a lot of their work at home. And then we had seniors. And you mix them all together, and you're going to end up, as we did in B1, with people taking hour-long showers. Can you believe it? We're supposed to be an eco-village. And they're taking hour-long showers. So in that building, I had to add a little 40-gallon hot water tank as a sidearm. It's pumped, and it helps out the other two single element tanks that go onto my solar. So in the wintertime, you have to design so that if you find yourself with an odd demographic, that you can assist that, as I did at building 1. So just because my measurements all across New York show very low simultaneity, as we call it, and low actual use in a day, there's places that you end up with a surprise. So I don't want to go too far into the supply side, but one of the benefits of the heat pump is that it's long and slow. You can't get fast recovery with a heat pump. But if you hook it, as I do, to my solar tanks now, I didn't do it the first phase of solar, but now in the second phase, I keep those solar tanks, 1,200 gallons of water, at least 80 degrees in the winter, thanks to the heat pump. Now, the heat pump runs in the nighttime and during the day, and it assists the solar system to preheat the water for my electric backup hot water tanks. So the lift goes from 80 to 120 instead of 45, which it gets to in Rotterdam in the wintertime, to 120. Consequently, we keep this flywheel, this thermal flywheel going, because the energy density of water is great. And by the way, a gallon of water doesn't cost very much. Now, I like to go to phase change. materials, because phase change materials are more energy dense, but we've got room enough right now to avoid putting in phase change materials. But I like to do that, but that's another subject.
All right, we're I have a 10 o'clock I'm going to have to get on, so we're going to jump to, and I'm going to take some of the other interview questions that we did with your the pulsar round, etc., and I'll add those answers in here. But for this concluding part, why don't you tell us what you're most energized about today, Pete?
Well, I'm energized today because I'm going to be meeting with my client, Dave, and selling him a heat pump hot water heater hybrid system for his new clubhouse. 8 apartments with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and his own apartment that's kind of a palatial penthouse with a great big jacuzzi tub. So I have to not only try to keep it small, try to keep the energy requirements low, but I also have to have enough hot water to keep his wife happy, because she likes to take these jacuzzi tub things. That's at least 40 gallons in one shot.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to keep her happy. And in a case like this, I have to not only do it with a heat pump. This is unitary heat pump. I'm going to use an AWESome that has a good recovery rate, and maybe operate it in the hybrid mode, but have a 40-gallon hot water tank with 2 elements in it adjacent to it, so that if we find we have an issue, I have a backup there that can help Dave and his wife have the existence they'd like to have in this luxury clubhouse adjacent to the eco luxury 24 apartment buildings. So this is a little bit different arrangement, and it makes me excited to have to blend technology that's going to get the job done in a more challenging environment.
Outstanding. So, grand finale, piece of parting advice and the best way for people to get a hold of you, Pete.
You can get a hold of me on the telephone. I actually talk to people all the time. I can do it, especially because I have to drive and I'm always talking on the phone. So you can call me at 518-369-3208. And you can text me there, because sometimes I'm talking to somebody else. And you can get me on email, because I do all kinds of stuff with email. I don't do all that other social media stuff, but you can get me on email at the number 2G, that's E2G at Verizon.net. And I almost on the email. And I love to talk to people, and I love to help them, try to do something to save our Earth.
And the biggest piece of parting advice that you'd like to share with people, for them to keep in mind as they go forward?
Don't be afraid to do it yourself. Really. The way you do it yourself, when you do it yourself, you see what works and what doesn't work. And that's how I grew up. And that's what I do each day, is try it yourself. For instance, last night, I had to get that baby grand that I never played out of the house. And Betsy said, I'm tired of that thing sitting there taking up such a big amount of space. So my son and I created a elliptic underneath, and we rolled that baby grand up onto a dolly, and I rolled it outdoors, and somebody's going to pick it up and take it away. So if anybody wants a baby grand that was kind of bad action, I got one.
Pete Skinner, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time, insights, wisdom, and boy, great progress with making net zero buildings more cost effective and widespread throughout the world. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I give tours. It's also on that the solar tour. So anytime you want, come over and I'll show you how we really did it. And a lot of times it's on construction. Construction starts on the last phase. There we're working on a lot of low embedded carbon design as well as net zero. So we'd really like to show you why NYSERDA has given us multiple awards for our innovations. And we want to see it done all across New York and all across America, because that's how we're going to try to, provide an Earth for our grandchildren.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Pete. Have a great day.
Oh, you're very welcome. Ron, just keep doing the great stuff you're doing. And by the way, yeah, that's right.
By the way?
Yeah, I'd really like to work with you on we'll call it a small lecture series, more focused on plumbers and architects and engineers that would provide them some real hard numbers that they can use in their designs, why we are able to successfully put our designs into real use. You can crunch numbers all day long, but if you have unhappy tenants, you don't have a good outcome. So consequently, our experience can be used as a template all across America. And we're ready to tell people. We do it with Plumbing Engineering, which is a little magazine that comes out. We have a lecture series going on with that. And we do go to conferences, and we're not trying to get rich here. We're trying to make change.
Excellent. Outstanding. Yeah, let's talk about that. And actually, I have an AIA program that I run with some folks down in Westchester that would be perfect for that. Do you have AIA accreditation, by the way? Can
Absolutely.
you give some credits?
Our series for plumbing engineering is AIA accredited. We also, in Terrytown, August 14th, I'm holding forth actually in person, just as long as everybody's vaccinated, for an 8-hour straight presentation of the numbers. Gary and I are going to team up. He's going to be on Zoom, and we will be showing how to make this all happen with some hands-on experience.
Thanks for joining us today, awesome people. We'd like to hear from you, and we'll give you the chance to win a $150 LED light fixture if you help us understand how Awesome EarthKind can help you achieve your clean energy goals. Just go to awesomeearthkind.com and click on Tell Us. When you fill out the survey, you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes for a free LED light fixture, and we'll be giving one away every month for the rest of the year. If you like what we're doing, please rate and review the Awesome EarthKind podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're interested in adding clean energy consulting to your existing business offerings, go to awesomeearthkind.com/earn. When you refer us to a commercial building and they decide to go clean and save green with EarthKind Energy's consulting services, your referral will save money and you'll earn finder's fees worth thousands of dollars. Remember, you are an awesome force of nature and can make a real difference. Take your next step to create the clean energy future we all want and our children need and deserve. Until next time, take care, be well, and energize.